Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about actually the very first feature film from famous film director Christopher Nolan. You know, Christopher Nolan, for those who don't know who he is, he's done The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Memento, Insomnia. He's done tons of big films. The Prestige was another big one he did. So before all those films were made, obviously every director has to have their first feature film, the film that kind of gets into film festivals, that kind of gets their name out there, that later lands them bigger projects like The Dark Knight, like Inception, and so forth. So Christopher Nolan's very first film was Following. And this is actually kind of a tricky film to track down, I think, just because I had to get it off Amazon for about 11, 12 bucks, I would say, with shipping. But I think it is on the Criterion Collection. So if you're not at a store that sells Criterion Collections like Barnes and Noble, it is kind of a tricky film to track down and probably not a very cheap film to track down. Like I said, 11, 12 bucks isn't terrible, but I did have to look around online to find a copy of this film. It is only 70 minutes long, so for anybody you might talk to, some might even say that's not even feature length, but that is kind of considered the first feature film from Christopher Nolan. So, like I said, it is the film I'm going to be reviewing for you today. So that's the cover of the film if you're looking for this. I'm sure the Criterion Collection version of the movie is very different looking as far as covers go. But in the film following you guys, it's about a man who is a writer. He is kind of lost for inspiration for this story he's writing. He needs ideas for characters. He's not good at writing down characters. So what he does is he'll start very early in the morning. He'll follow people around in a city. And it has to be random people. It can't be people he knows. It can't be people where he knows where they work or where they live. It has to be just completely random people that maybe he sees once or twice on a bus every now and then when he's going to work or going to a restaurant or whatever. And so he can't follow the same people twice. He has to he basically forms all these rules to make sure he doesn't get in trouble for what he's doing. But after a while, there is one person that does kind of catch on to what he's doing. And so he basically sits down with him at this restaurant where he catches him doing this. And he's trying to figure out what he's doing and why he's doing that. And so he comes up with a lie of, oh, you remind me of somebody I know, and I'm sorry I did that, and stuff like that. So obviously, this guy doesn't believe him. But this guy does happen to have a secret passion of robbing apartments. And so what he does is he kind of takes this guy under his wing. He teaches him something that's kind of in the vein of what he was doing with following people around. So they break into these apartments. They don't really take anything, and if they do, it's just kind of random, like a random CD or a random book or a random vase of some kind. Um, and so he said the point of why he's doing these robberies with this guy is they're trying to figure out what people are like without meeting them. And so they're kind of looking at their belongings, how they organize their apartment, and how they keep it clean or how messy it is. So there's all this stuff that this guy likes to observe while doing this little illegal robbery activity he likes to do. And so, like I said, he takes this guy who's following people under his wing for this. And it just kind of becomes worse and worse over time. And it really becomes something more sinister under the surface once you find out what that is. And there's this whole thing with him meeting a woman, and the woman has a connection. And it's really a very tough film to talk about without actually saying what it is and without revealing anything and spoiling anything. So that's about as much as I can say, as he's basically a part of these robberies. It's far worse than what he thinks at first. And once he finds out what really is going on, it's a far more sinister plan that he happens to get wrapped up in, and that's really the plot of Following. So overall, guys, I really enjoyed this film. I can see why it got Christopher Nolan on the map with Warner Brothers and other big studios that maybe hired him later on for bigger projects. Obviously, this is the film that led him to do Memento, and Memento led him to do other bigger projects later on too. And there's actually a lot of films that he's made so far that really are in Following. There's a lot of things that you can tell he went back to Following and kind of took inspiration. I think there's even a character named Cobb here from Inception. There's even a Batman symbol on somebody's door at one point. So there's small little things that obviously he worked on later on that I'm sure at the time he really didn't think of a lot of. But now that we're going back and seeing this film with all these films he's made, it is kind of funny seeing things from other films that have made their way into Following. And vice versa and so forth. So, for my positives and negatives of following, guys, I think first and foremost, what I liked about this film and what I learned online about the movie is this film was made with very little money. Christopher Nolan really didn't have a lot of money to make this movie. So what he did is when he wrote the script, he really tried to find a way to make it as cheap as possible. He really rehearsed every scene with every actor and actress to really make sure that they can get it with little takes as possible. So that way they can save money on film, and when they do film it, that obviously it'll be worth something rather than just trying it again, try it again, try it again, try it again. They really did kind of do everything they could to save money where they could. So whether it was saving on film, just rehearsing hundreds of times with the actors before actually filming the scene, or filming in places they have easy access to. So who knows? Maybe one of these apartments was Christopher Nolan's apartment at the time he filmed the movie and stuff like that. He really made this film with very little to no money, and so that's very inspirational for someone like me and maybe someone like you who are trying to make films and get noticed and get, make films that make it into film festivals and get you noticed and land you bigger projects and so forth. So it's really inspirational to see one of my favorite all-time directors kind of go back to the film that made him famous, landed him bigger projects and stuff like that. So the fact that it was made with little to no money, I thought was very inspirational. The film also is in black and white, and I feel like that kind of adds to the movie. I think if this film was made in color, it either would have been too cheap looking, maybe because of how low the budget was for the movie, or it just would have been another film in color and really not have meant anything. But I think the black and white really kind of makes it feel like an older film, and I think that's something that Nolan probably wanted at the time, is kind of an old film noir kind of look to the movie, and just making it look older and contemporary. And there's a lot of things in the movie where a lot of things in following could happen today if the story happened today and stuff like that. So he really tried to make it feel contemporary and not too much like the 90s. I think this film was made in 1999, I believe. So he really adds an element to the movie by filming it in black and white, kind of like what Alfred Hitchcock did with Psycho, and it really adds element to the movie. This is also a very mysterious story. It really kept me guessing until the end as to what exactly was happening with the guy, why this guy took him under his wing so easily. For something as big as robberies, how do you take someone under your wing like that so easily? And so they kind of go over that. And like I said, it is a very mysterious story. You kind of wonder who this woman is that he gets involved with and stuff like that. So it's a very mysterious story. It works for me. I really like the movie. This also has a very intriguing concept to it. The film was very interesting to me when he's following people around and getting inspiration and stuff like that. And it's interesting too when he's part of these robberies also. Um, I think the overall concept is a very interesting one for the movie. Um, when we do go to the robbery segments, it does kind of lose steam after a while. And I'm going to go over that in my negatives here in a minute too. But it is a very intriguing concept overall for a film, so I like what they did with it. And overall, this has pretty good acting to the movie. I don't know if they just rehearsed hundreds of times to the point where Nolan got these people to master their characters, or if he really did hire the right people for the job to make this film work and be effective, because I'm sure he wasn't able to get a hold of any celebrities at the time to make this movie. And it's just very good acting. So like I said, whether it was rehearsed hundreds of times or these people really knew what their characters were, very good acting to the movie. I really liked it a lot. Now, for my negatives of Following, it's not quite Nolan's best film. I think he has made way better films since Following, of course. But for my negatives of this film, it is slow moving at times. There is times where just like you kind of wanted to just pick up the pace a little bit, and the editing's kind of awkward in some parts. It just kind of ends, and then it just moves on to the random scene. It kind of cuts to black for 2 seconds, goes to a random next scene of some kind. So it is kind of slow moving at times. Not horrible. I've definitely seen worse cases of this, but it is kind of slow moving at times. And after a while in the movie, it really doesn't follow anybody. The whole, for being a concept about following people and getting inspiration, it kind of drops that after a while. It kind of focuses more on like the robberies and what this guy really is doing that he's teaming up with for the robberies and so forth. So I didn't like how it kind of dropped the whole following thing after a while, how he wasn't following people around anymore. So I didn't like how that aspect got dropped because that was one of the more interesting concepts and ideas in the movie for me personally. Uh, it's still good, but the fact that they completely drop it at one point in the story is something I really didn't care for. And this is a very early Christopher Nolan. You can definitely tell he was kind of still a student at the time, still kind of learning what his vibe was going to be. Obviously, I think the more films he made, the more he kind of realized what kind of filmmaker he was, that he wanted more of the IMAX feel and more of the big budget feel, like The Dark Knight and Inception and so forth. So this is a very early Christopher Nolan. So if you're looking for something that's on point with like those kind of films. Unfortunately, it doesn't really do that just because it is so early on in his career and he was still trying to figure out what he wanted to be as a filmmaker at this point in his life and so forth. So, very early Christopher Nolan, so just forgive him if some aspects of the film don't work as perfectly as you're used to seeing him do in some of his later films. So overall, guys, I liked Following a lot. It's an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I really like this film. If you haven't seen Following, if you love Christopher Nolan like I do, not a bad film to track down. Like I said, it is a little tricky to track down now, but if you can find it for a reasonable price, I definitely highly recommend it. Interesting to see an early Christopher Nolan, what he was like and what he was doing for films at the time and so forth. So very good movie, 8.5 out of 10 for me. I highly recommend Following.